I heard that under this post-eclipse glow, you are breaking free. Under this post-eclipse glow, you are breaking free. My name is Solarah. How are you guys doing today? I am recording this on Friday, February the 20th. So about 3 days and an hour or two after the solar annular eclipse we just experienced. And there's been a lot of interesting energy that has been flying in the aftermath of this eclipse. And I'm going to get into like a whole bunch of downloads. I've got a lot of pages of writing here to get into today. Okay, so this is going to be a video that is dedicated to some downloads I started to receive. I want to say the eclipse was Tuesday, so it was Wednesday morning. I started to download a lot of this information. I got a little bit more of it yesterday, and then I compiled it into the notes for today a few hours ago. So let's get into it. Under this post-eclipse glow, you are breaking free. Now, this download began to come through for me in sleep. Like I said, on Wednesday morning. I was actually taking a nap on Wednesday morning, and this message started to stream, not as a dream, literally a download, okay? You know, that place between sleep and being consciously aware. A lot of information can come through more clearly, which is why, for those of you who haven't compared notes, compare how you dream under the influence of the sun versus under the influence of the moon. And speaking of dreaming, we are officially now in Pisces season. I think as I record, we're moving from the first to the second degree of Pisces. The sun is moving from the first into the second degree of Pisces. So we are entering into a huge gateway through which a lot of our dream fields are being upgraded, cleared, in accordance with who we are and in accordance with our what we're doing to facilitate this, right? And that really comes down to your own, belief structures, etc. So when I was receiving this download, I was seeing very specifically that there are Atlantean contracts that were old anchoring contracts that have been completely dismantled and are clearing through this eclipse corridor, beginning with this first eclipse we had, the new moon in Aquarius on Tuesday the 17th, which was a solar annular eclipse. Okay, so very specifically, I heard Atlantean stationing contracts. Atlantean stationing contracts are clearing now. Before I get into what Atlantean stationing contracts are, I want to explain to you how I was feeling and experiencing this download. So I was feeling all of a sudden a surging of energy flowing through limbs, especially through legs, but also through arms. And when I began to tune into the energy of what it was speaking to me, it was showing me how this eclipse energy has liberated a lot of the false scripts, scrolls, and commands that resided within our energy fields, very specifically within our bone structures, within our nervous systems, and within our fascia, right? Understand and overstand also, this eclipse is also working in accordance with the energy of the sign that it's occurring in. And it happened in Aquarius, okay? And I have said to you before, I've talked about this in a few videos here. I also revisited it on my New Moon in Aquarius eclipse tarot astrology ascension report on my other channel, Solarah Rises, that I published a few days ago. I published on the day of the eclipse. I've been speaking about how the original elemental contracts of the earth are coming back online. But very specifically through the New Moon in Aquarius window, the elemental contracts connected to water and air, right? Because Aquarius, of course, is the water bearer. Now, why is this important also? Well, Aquarius is in charge of circuitry and networking, hence the reason why we think of it when it comes to technology and the internet. But it's not only to do with technology in terms of networking, circuitry, and connecting through what we call the World Wide Web. It's actually the circuitry that exists within us that the World Wide Web and the internet was actually built upon. In other words, the way that the false matrix has utilized technology, including the formation and the manifestation, I should say, of the internet and the World Wide Web as we know it, is in replication to our true energy fields and how they run and how they work. In other words, our energy fields interface with the earth, the cosmos, and one another like a big world wide web or like an internet. And one of the ways that it interfaces in our actual bodies, the webbing that acts that way physically in our bodies is our fascia. Okay, so our fascia holds a lot of information and circuitry on a personal level that is designed to connect and interconnect with wider webs and circuits. Okay, and we have this circuitry running in a myriad of ways, but one of the huge ways it's connected to us is through our fascia. So the reason this was coming through, this message about breaking free under the post-eclipse glow, because I was seeing that some of you across time, you were bound to trees and mountains. You were bound in contract, your energy fields were bonded to trees and mountains. Now, why would they bind you to a tree or a mountain? Think about it. Because what is enacted in the invisible, etherically, is inevitably what plays out in the material realms, in the material planes. What is visible is a reflection of what is occurring in the invisible, not the other way around. So you want to affect change and shifts materially, you must go to the root of the structure of what is occurring materially in the spirit, in the etheric. Okay, so if they're binding you through etheric contracts, but they're binding you to anchor points on the earth that are trees and mountains, think about what trees and mountains represent. Trees and mountains can't move. They're very powerful for anchoring in energies that aren't supposed to move, but they're not here to bind bodies. They're not here to bind your bodies of existence, right? Because when your bodies of existence are binded, then your physical body and your physical timelines become a manifestation and expression of that binding. Okay, so for some of you also, what I was seeing is that you've had timelines and incarnations on the earth where you have you've been disabled, right? You've lost mobility. Maybe you were born that way on the earth, or maybe you've lost mobility through accidents. And this would also be a manifestation of this energy. Okay, so it can manifest itself in a myriad of ways. What you need to know is that the most important factor here is that it was designed to cause you to be unable to move forward in life. And in some incarnations and timelines, it meant that you literally couldn't do that because of limitations placed upon your body. Okay, so these Atlantean stationing contracts, where some of you were binded to trees and mountains, they were designed to tie you very specifically to certain timelines, locations, grids, themes, bloodlines, etc. Now, if this is resonating for you, then you may have felt very activated in the post-eclipse energy. You may have felt a lot of energy surging through your arms and through your legs, very specifically, through your joints. A lot of energy began to become liberated and started to move. And we're going to get into that too. It's also because a lot of this was leaving through the limbs. Okay, so those spells and contracts are now dissolving naturally, because the elemental contracts and upgrades that this eclipse has brought in now means that those original spells and contracts and scripts can no longer reside on the earth, and they can no longer therefore reside in the bodies that they were connected to through the earth, if that makes sense. Okay, so there's a lot happening right now that has to do with our bodily connections to the earth. Like I was speaking about in the last video about those certain women whose wombs are connected to certain sea caves on the earth that reinvigorate the true water codes, the true source water codes coming back and into circulation on the earth that have a lot to do with the way that laws are anchored, the way currency flows, the way we have access to our resources, the way we have access to what is allowed to flow through these grid systems that exist, this circuitry that exists invisibly, that we are all connected to in our own bodies. And I'm not only talking about your physical body, I'm talking about all your bodies of existence. I'm talking about your emotional body, your mental body, your etheric and astral body layers. All of your body layers are interconnected, and everything, you're connected to all things. And this is what Pisces, the energy of Pisces, begins to show us. And through Pisces season this year, we are coming back into proper interconnectedness with all things, so that we are no longer connected in ways where we are sacrificing self for the so-called greater good. But what it's really dealing with, it's dealing with those themes on an energetic level. And it's especially heightened because we are now in Pisces season, with the North Node also in Pisces. So we got a lot of Pisces energy flowing right now. We've got the sun, we've got the moon presently leaving Pisces. At the time of recording, we've got, I'm pretty sure Mercury, Venus, and Mars are all in Pisces. And then we have, of course, the North Node in Pisces. Okay, so a lot of Piscean energy. And Pisces is the end of the cycle, the end of the road, where either we're going to get re-immersed, 15:15 on my clock, either we're going to get re-immersed into the collective stream that separates us from self, or we're going to find our true interconnectedness with the all while still maintaining our sovereignty. And that's what this Pisces season and this eclipse season is here to facilitate. And so we've just come through the new moon and Aquarius eclipse. So our circuitry is being cleared and brought back online properly, so that what flows through us can flow through us clearly and accurately, and we can be connected with the right things that are supposed to flow through us, if that makes sense. So a lot of this, these Atlantean stationing contracts, they were designed to bind you in such a way that your channels and circuits became under the dominion and the control of other beings and grids, so that your system could be used to either block certain things from coming onto the earth, or to cause false circuitry, and your system was used to be a conduit through which that false circuitry flowed. And understand and overstand that this is what introduced the death and the decaying templates on the earth that go against source code. Okay, because when your system gets used in such a way that is contrary to who you are, it introduces stalls, and the stalling factors then begin to introduce untimely death templates, untimely death and decay templates, which is where disease came into our bodies and we started to die on the earth from disease. That wasn't the case before. Okay, so what you're going to also see, what I've noticed in the past few days, when you hear about certain people passing this year, a lot of it is going to be to do with how their circuitry is still connected to false matrix contracts that no longer are allowed to have timelines on the earth. And because they've stayed connected through their bodies to those timelines and scripts, they're going to be taken offline. So what do I mean by that? Everything that you go through in the false matrix, it's a script, whether it's a script that aligns with your own, your own blueprint, or whether it's a script that you have been assigned to run through your system and to create timelines from. And so a lot of the diagnoses in the false matrix were based upon false matrix scripts that are the result of many things. They are the result of how our biology became co-opted because we were shut down. And then they are the result of social conditioning through which we've been taught to believe our bodies work in a certain way. And because we co-sign in the agreement to that script, we begin to materialize it. And when we materialize it, it's not just all willy-nilly out of nowhere. Our circuitry and our grids and the instructions within our biological fields and how they connect to the grid structures of the earth, they become connected. So if certain people have believed certain things about themselves and they have allowed for their bodies to begin to produce certain timelines of illnesses that they've been prescribed, the diagnosis is the agreement upon a script within the body, then their body becomes contracted to the timelines, the structures, the grids, the fields, etc., that run those scripts. And so now through this rapid ascension on the earth, as those grids, timelines, fields that supported those stories start to come offline and they start to leave the earth, the bodies that stay connected to those stories that are running that were running the circuitry of those scripts to keep them alive on the earth, those will be going out too. Okay, that's just a side note. But let's get into these Atlantean stationing contracts and what they were actually designed to do. And let's look at it through the lens of the download that was coming through, because what I was really seeing was how certain beings who have been binded and tethered since the Atlantean timelines, very specifically to certain trees and mountains, you are breaking free from those tethers, those contracts, those hooks, and the replication of the false scripts that kept running in your fields due to that original binding point. Okay, so if you were binded, some of you were binded to trees, some of you were binded to mountains, some of you were binded to both. Okay, and as always, before I continue, I'm going to make a disclaimer. Only ever take what resonates, because when you take into your system things that are not resonant with the truth of who you are and what you're going through, that is again coming into agreement with another script. You write your own reality based upon what you believe, so make sure that you are co-signing your beliefs with the truth of who you are. Okay, so with the tree binding, a lot of it was to do with root claims and tethers. So the root claims and tethers, or the root commands and tethers, were designed to tell your field, your roots belong here and nowhere else. You may not branch out anywhere else. You may not move anywhere else. They belong here. And when I say here, I'm not necessarily only talking about like locationally. Like some of you are not even binded, let's put it this way, you're not even binded locationally to the place in the world where the original binding occurred to the tree or the mountain. It has little to do with you actually being in that location, although it was designed to bind you to certain locations through the work. Okay? So a lot of the tree binding actually has to do with the bloodlines and the families that you were binded to as a high frequency being in the Atlantean contract. So I've talked about this before, but I'll breeze through it very quickly now. Many of you who resonate with my work, you were binded in the Atlantean contracts to only be able to incarnate on the earth through very specific bloodlines and lineages. And so the reason for that was because you had to stay under the contracts connected to them so that they could continue to control you and have access to who you are and what it is that you represent and what it is that you have access to because of who you are. Okay? So understand and overstand that everything they do in the false matrix is a reflection of what is going on in the etheric, of what it is they're exacting and grounding etherically. So when you look at how they have enforced certain trafficking systems where amongst the elite, they pass beings around in different capacities, it is the same thing they were doing in the spirit with certain beings too. So a lot of you were binded into these bloodline and lineage circuits where you could only incarnate into certain lineages on the earth to keep you under the thumb of their control. Okay, so the tree binding, a lot of you, that's what it has to do with. Okay, so the tree binding was designed to make sure that you didn't get to move. You didn't get to move into your power. You didn't get to move into your truth. You didn't get to move into your true timelines. And you didn't get to move into anything that would connect you with the possibility of being able to do that. So when you ventured into timelines that were not part of the script that you were binded into through these Atlantean stationing contracts, where in some instances they use trees and mountains, where when you began to move out of their prescribed script, you would be pulled back automatically. And the anchor point through which you were being pulled back into was the tree or the mountain. How dare you? In other words, what it's saying is, how dare you try to move out of the constructs that we have assigned to you on the earth planes. You are only allowed to move within the context of this energetic reality, these timelines, this circuitry, this group of people who treat you this way. This is the only reality you're allowed to be exposed to on the earth, per your false matrix binding contracts that began with these Atlantean stationing contracts. Okay? This was also designed so that your resources, your source codes, your access, what your energy field is designed to give access to, it would be siphoned through their false root system. Okay, so a lot of the time when you're dealing with the trees, you're dealing with, like I said, you're dealing with bloodline binds. So you're dealing with families, family trees. You were binded into those trees, those family trees, through literal trees on the earth. Okay, through rituals, etc., technologies from the Atlantean timelines. Now, the mountain binding was an extension of that oftentimes, because the mountains provide a point of jurisdiction through which you could be overseen. Okay, so you were assigned to mountains to hold certain energies, And this is where and how your power was measured and monitored. So you weren't allowed to go past a certain level. The mountain, the stability of the mountain kept your frequency in check. Okay, and so your movement would require permission. So a lot of the mountain contracts are also connected to handler contracts, which I'm sure you can relate to also. Handlers were physical bodies that were placed in your existence so that your frequency wouldn't rise past a certain level, so that your resources could be controlled and redirected. So your frequency could be constantly monitored. Now, the mountain binds are not necessarily just family, they're actually binds that existed on the systemic level. And that was designed because high frequency beings, you are encoded into the earth planes to keep all things in harmonious balance and coherence. And in the false matrix, if you came back into that position, all of their technologies would go offline. But they still needed you. They still needed you to access the very codes that built their false infrastructures were built upon. Everything in the false matrix was built upon source code. It was built upon the inversion of it and the siphoning of it. So they still needed source encoded beings, but they needed to control us and bind us and to station us where they needed us. Okay. Let's get into more details about the Atlantean stationing contracts. Okay, and then we'll talk a little bit about how these things are leaving, a little bit more about why. Okay, so the Atlantean stationing contracts, what was the purpose of these? The core purpose of the Atlantean stationing contracts was to keep high frequency source encoded beings bound and in place so that their power could be used to stabilize false grids and circuits. Okay, that's one purpose, right? And understand and overstand that the Atlantean timelines and these Atlantean contracts came online. Let's remember why it occurred. They came online when certain beings decided that we needed to evolve in a more collective manner. Okay, so the way that the earth was organized originally was that if you had the codes to be here, to experience yourself, you had the integrity on a soul level to be here, then you were allowed to be here and to evolve at your own rate for as long as you were not keeping things out of harmonic coherence, right? So everyone had their own soul contract, and everyone moved in accordance with the pace of what their lessons required of them on an individual level. Okay, the Atlantean contracts came into play because certain beings felt like there should be some kind of equalizing or leveling of the field where we were moving and evolving more cohesively. That's how it began, and it quickly descended because that is not how source code can be maintained. And it quickly descended because of, a lot of the time, because of ego, right? And it became something where certain beings wanted to therefore get access to things they shouldn't have access to, and begin to create hierarchical structures whereby beings had to connect through them now to their source code. And a lot of the ways they enacted this ability to take from source encoded beings was through the technologies that have returned to the earth now. So through what we like, these computers and all of these technologies that didn't exist 20 years ago, and AI and all of these things, they've always existed, to be completely honest. They just haven't existed in the collective consciousness for millennia. But the way an energy leaves is the same way it entered. And so the bridge into our descension and into these Atlantean timelines, it was through these technologies that were created through our source code. So the way back into our golden age timelines and the true remembrance of who we are is also through this technology returning, because in many ways this technology has returned for collective access, for us to get back those things that we've forgotten about ourselves, because we've been in like a deep freeze. We've been in a deep freeze, quite literally. The earth has been in like a huge motherfucking freezer spell. And this is what we're going through. They call it climate change, but what we're going through is the thawing of our true timelines, the thawing of the grand freezer spell they had us in order to freeze our reality into these timeline loops that we kept on going through. And it's affected everything, including the weather and the climate, right? This is not how we're supposed to be on the earth. The earth was never supposed to be this disparate in climate. Okay, the staunch separation in polarity and the expression of polarity is a false matrix agenda. Polarity exists, but it's not supposed to be so discordant and disharmonious and separate. Okay, so one of the core purposes also was to now, let me just read my notes. Was to take our power as source encoded beings and to redirect our power and our access to non-source encoded beings, as well as our access codes and our portal access. It was reverted to these beings through their false technologies, through their overlays, and through, a lot of them had robotic bodies, like robotic body overlays. So we have, as source encoded beings, you have your true light body, and you have a myriad of bodies depending on who you are, what you're connected to. If you have dragon DNA, a seraphim DNA, all of your DNA connects to a body, right? What a lot of these beings did, and these were especially what I'm beginning to call like the Yahweh coded beings, they were channeling our bodies through one body layer that was actually based upon their technology. So it wasn't an organic body that was connected to source. It was an overlay they created that almost, you know, like how in movies you have like the cyborgs and, you know, those kinds of bodies. They are those are an inspiration based upon the bodies that many of these Yahweh coded beings were creating through their false technologies to channel the technologies that ran through our organic bodies. Okay? So they created bodies and overlays that were designed to plug into source coded beings, to channel source code through their bodies of existence, to therefore give them control of the things that certain source encoded beings had access to. And understand and overstand that all source encoded beings had access to different things in accordance with who they are. So like I said the other day, there are certain beings who are coming back online, women who are coming back online, whose wombs directly connect to the sea caves of the earth. So these beings are creating like these technological, I don't know how to explain it, but these like computer-based wombs that are part of their energy field that are connecting to the wombs of these women who are directly connected to source code and to the grids of the earth. And the water grids of the earth specifically, so that they can reenact what these women do through their technology, through their false womb structures. This is how it began in the Atlantean timelines, and this is what we're coming back to the remembrance of because it's clearing. So remember I said in the last video, a lot of these quote unquote, I'm just going to call them Yahweh coded beings for now because that's what I channeled, okay? A lot of these Yahweh coded beings have been coming back online in ascension, and people have been following them thinking that they have all of this ascension information and wisdom, which many of them do, but it's still because they were connected to the source coded beings who they originally in those timelines took offline in order to have access to things on the earth that they shouldn't have had access to. I hope you're following me. Okay, so these false, I'm going to call them robotic bodies that existed in these Yahweh coded beings, they were created to replace true source encoded light body technology so they could siphon it for their own purpose. Okay, they could siphon it and they could replicate it for their own purpose. Another core purpose of the Atlantean stationing contracts was so that to prevent source encoded beings from building independent material momentum. So the stationing contracts were designed to prevent you from building independent material momentum. So what did that mean? It meant that your independence and your financial sovereignty would destabilize the false matrix grids and the false matrix authority holders, their access to your power and your codes. So it would deauthorize them, it would deauthorize the Yahweh code, it would deauthorize everyone and anyone who had been plugging into you to redirect your source code, right? Whether it was those Yahweh coded beings or the ones that later on got access, okay? So how were these contracts also enforced? One way they were enforced were through bloodline carrier clauses, what I'm calling bloodline carrier clauses, as well as inheritance circuitry. Okay, so this is why many of us were bound into very specific bloodlines, because these master-slave contracts, they ran through very specific lineages on the earth, and they automatically binded and siphoned us as we incarnated into these bloodlines. So they were plugging us into family grids that were control nodes in the false matrix that were also connected to the systemic binding and harvesting nodes. So you were connected to family siphoning and energy harvesting grids that then put you into circulation systemically and globally to be harvested and siphoned. And this is also why many of you were scapegoats in your family reality, and you carried that template throughout every single group and relationship you found yourself in the false matrix. The siphoning, it began in the family environment, but it would always replicate with every being and group you came into contact with. This wasn't just spells or entity jumping. This was literal grid technology and the contracts you were binded into in the Atlantean age, so that every time you incarnated, you would not be able to break out of the siphoning system because you were gridded into it through the family, and you were gridded into it through the systems on the earth too. Now, the inheritance circuitry I'm talking about, it meant that it didn't need your individual consent to run this programming because it already existed through the family grid and the vow structures that were within that family grid also. This is why so much of your personal sovereign consent was continually overwritten in the false matrix. Okay? And even for many of you who have, worked with in the context of escaping these family grids for the past few years, you may have noticed that even as you did certain work, sovereignty work, you would still somehow get pulled back into something. You'd still get pulled back into it. You clean and clear a certain area only to get pulled back into something that you had to clean and clear again. That was to do with the very grid structures and technologies that you were programmed into. It didn't even have to do with the individual spells and the spells that were connected to these groups. It had to do with the literal foundational structures that were set to keep you binded. And in many cases, this included you being binded to certain trees and mountain ranges on the earth too. So mountains and trees, they are natural anchor points on the earth. They are designated posts on earth where your energy was bound so that the spell became grounded into natural entities in the physical that didn't move. It was a grounding of what they were already enacting upon you etherically and what they were already running through the grid and the circuitry, the grids and the circuitry. So this is ancient. You can call this ancient sympathetic magic. So sympathetic magic is when you utilize something, like a lot of the time you utilize something physical and material to bring into reality something in real time that you're enacting through that material object. So a good example of this, an overused example of this is a voodoo doll, right? Or what they call a voodoo doll, right? Or a puppet, where people would take an effigy. This has existed for a really long time, an effigy of something, whether it was made out of clay, and they would use parts that belonged to the certain being that was supposed to be the effigy or the doll, and then they would breathe life into it, and they would use their voice as a command over it, as if they were the god over that doll and that being whose spirit essence they were channeling through the doll. And then they would do all manner of things to have an effect on the living being through the doll. That's a basic comprehension of what sympathetic magic was, right? A lot of the laws around magic rituals and spells and how they were thwarted and fucked with through the false matrix, they don't exist anymore. So a lot of the ways these beings have been trying to use magic in ways that are unlawful, it's no longer sticking, because the grids of the earth, the circuits of the earth, the very bodies on the earth that once upon a time supported the perpetuation of certain magic, the perpetuation of certain energy replication, energy magnification, because that's what magic is. It's just putting something into momentum through the application of command over energy. It doesn't exist anymore because the earth is rising back into a place where those timelines and those expressions of energy are once again being detected as unlawful and therefore spat out. Okay, so this tethering you to the mountains and the trees through these Atlantean stationing contracts, it was an ancient form of sympathetic magic. And this was just but one layer of the bind. This was the grounding of the energy. It doesn't make up for all of the complexities through which you were binded. Like I said, you were binded to the earth in this way. You were binded to other beings' fake bodies that they were channeling your energy through with their robotic overlays and the artificial intelligence they were using to emulate source code and to channel it and to create or to manifest on the earth through that. You know, and then there were the literal rituals they were also doing. So it's ritual, it's technology, it's using of the natural resources on the earth, and then it's also off-planet technologies and off-planet interference and contracts that had all of this stuff in 1544 on my clock, that had all of this stuff in momentum on the planet. And this is why ascension has been the way it's been, because literally we have been clearing these spells out layer by layer because they've accumulated and they've become established on the earth and within the atmospheric layers and within our bodies of existence over millennia, right? There were also, through the enforcement of these Atlantean stationing contracts, there were return mechanisms that were encoded within your field because of these spells and these technologies, right? So when you try to move forward or beyond the boundaries of the bind or the spell or what your system had been commanded into through false matrix contracts, it triggered an instant recoil. And the instant recoil would bring into your reality delays, collapses, blocks, conflicts, or the inability to literally leave certain people, situations, and locations. Anything to put you back into the trauma or event loop that they needed you binded to in order to keep siphoning you and having access to the gates, the circuits, and the grids via your energy field and your source code. So they needed you in certain position to continue doing this. So everything in your reality was designed to keep you there. From the people you were like literally coded to call in certain beings and situations and timelines, which is why it felt so impossible to escape and to figure out who it was that was running this or that, because literally you were coded to call in experiences and timelines. And then they went and hijacked a lot of ascension, especially since 2020. So they've been using a lot of Yahweh coded beings very specifically to bring people the information about the twin flames and all this other shit that they again were using to co-opt beings to pull certain experiences and people into their lives to again try to reenact and reinstate these Atlantean stationing contracts. There was a huge influx of this energy last February, last Aquarius season, where a lot of these Yahweh coded beings started to come back online and try to reinstate these contracts again, these Atlantean stationing contracts. Understand and overstand, a lot of these beings is unconscious. They don't even realize that that's how their systems were once used. But that's what it was. And again, the way energy is cyclical. It's cyclical. The way something enters is the same way it must leave. So in order for us to get out of these stationing contracts, a lot of the time we've had to come face to face with the very beings that put us in those contracts. It's a part of the getting free. Okay, and as we've gotten free, this is what is allowing through this eclipse season for the ability of these contracts that were like running through us, calling these things in. They're no longer really going to be able to work. The false timelines that we were being forced to hold, the false union codes, the being connected to beings who really don't truly love you on a source code level, but just want to take from you what it is they're able to take or have access to. A lot of that is being cleared out of our fields and being cleared out of the earth too, because we've held on to a lot of that coding also through our own trauma, through our own, through the ways we've been programmed and conditioned against ourselves through trauma. Not only in this timeline or lifetime, but across incarnations, we've been traumatized repeatedly. So our systems would hold the remembrance of these things so that every time we came back onto the earth, we would just continue to build upon that story and call more of that same shit in and not realize that's what we were doing. Okay. Whew. Alrighty. There was something else I wanted to say about that too. I think I just lost it. Okay, let's get back into some more of the notes. So, another reason a lot of this stuff is leaving is because, like I said to you before, the very nervous system of the Earth's nervous system is being cleared of a lot of these timelines and these experiences, these spells, this false circuitry, these false contracts, commands. They're leaving the Earth and they're leaving our nervous systems too. 2026 is a year where we take back our nervous systems. Why is the nervous system so important? Your nervous system is like part of your fucking control center in terms of how it connects your bodies across time. Your nervous system within your physical body is what allows you to hold the fullness and the wholeness of your multidimensional truth. It's what allows for you to bring your several bodies of existence into this physical body and into your material timelines, which is why they wanted your nervous system frazzled, which is why they programmed you through trauma so that you would be fragmented, so you wouldn't be able to properly hold the fullness of who you are, the fullness of your power, the fullness of your true organic source encoded timelines, because your nervous system acts as a control center and a container. And if it's fragmented and broken, it can only hold fragmented, broken timelines and expressions of and false expressions of you. It can only hold false personas. It can only hold emanations of you that are limited and three-dimensional as opposed to multi-dimensional. Your nervous system is the interface through which you are able to bring in your infinite and cosmic reality and have it hold on the earth. Okay? So, in fucking up the Earth's nervous system and in using us to fuck up the Earth's nervous system also, because we are the Earth and she is us, and certain members, certain source encoded beings, your energy fields, your physical bodies are literally coded to her directly, right? For certain reasons. We're all connected to the earth, right? But there are certain beings who are coded very specifically to the operations of the earth, to her nervous system. When you fuck with their nervous systems, you fuck directly with the earth's nervous system, right? And I talked about that in the last video. So as we heal, she heals. As she heals, we heal. And we're able to bring these things back online, because the reason the earth was also unable to hold our multidimensional contracts and truth before, also the earth was unable to hold these timelines because her nervous system was shattered too. Her nervous system had been binded and fragmented to hold these false contracts and to only produce replications of truth. Replications of source code that were diminished to match the false matrix coding, the limited experiences, right? So a lot of spells and contracts are dissolving. I should say this, a lot of spells and false contracts and scripts are dissolving naturally because of this eclipse energy, but also because of what it is that's occurring through it, which is, like I said to you before, there are new elemental contracts that are coming back online, or I should say, Earth's original elemental contracts are returning. They're returning on the earth and they're returning through us. through those source encoded beings that have always held the ability to bring these contracts back online. They are being liberated. We are being liberated. We are breaking free because of this eclipse energy, very specifically as it pertains to the elemental contracts that are coming on board or online again because of this. Okay, so somebody, I had a client yesterday and she shared something with me that I was not aware of, right? So I told you guys that even the internet, the way that we connect with the internet, the agreements on the earth with the internet were going through an upgrade and an activation through this new moon in Aquarius. And what she said to me yesterday was that YouTube, on the day of the eclipse, you know, I think maybe 12 hours out of the eclipse, or maybe the day after, I forget. I think it was like 12 hours out of the eclipse, that it went down for 2 whole hours globally. And I didn't realize, because when this was happening, I was like, it was like 3 to 5 in the morning, my time. So I was sleeping. I didn't know this, but apparently it went down for a whole 2 hours, you know, and that's not a fucking coincidence. Okay. I talked about this. I forget what video I talked about this in. It's like maybe 2 or 3 videos, you know, away from this one. I don't remember, where I talked very specifically about, in that video, it was a reading, and 2007, the contracts of 2007 were coming in very specifically, and how there were internet contracts that were made that were like false matrix overwrite of the true contracts that were supposed to come onto the earth, right? And that the internet contracts were coming into another place of upgrade through this eclipse, all the way through to the new moon in Aries. These upgrades are occurring, and they can't be thwarted anymore. So what does that mean? That means that all of these, the internet, the platforms, everything will have to eventually come back under source code. They can either do it through choosing to, or they can choose not to, and those platforms will no longer exist past a certain level. The frequency of the earth will not hold them. They will fall into their own destruction, which is why you already see a lot of these beings, a lot of these systems, they are automatically trying to do things now to be of more service to humanity. Because what is Aquarian energy? It's about humanitarianism. It's about serving your humanity to connect with your divinity. And so a lot of these systems are making changes because they are taking people's needs into account more. Some of them it's fake, because they just want to be able to try to move forward. But at a certain point, if they're not in proper alignment with the frequency, all of the pretending in front of people and the wearing masks and the trying to use the gift of the gab to tell people who they are, what it is, it's not going to work at a certain point. It's not going to work. So a lot of these spells, these stalls, these contracts, they were stored and frozen. I'm going to use that word very specifically, frozen, in your spine and in your bones, as well as in your nervous system and your fascia. Okay, so they were frozen in your bones and your spine, but they also were becoming frozen through your nervous system and your fascia. Okay, and the reason why I'm using this word frozen was because, like I said to you before, the earth has been in this big fucking freezer spell, a huge fucking freezer spell. How does a freezer spell work? A freezer spell is sympathetic magic again. It's when you take something that you choose to want to freeze and stop, and you write a petition, you put it in the freezer, and it stops, right? The earth, in terms of how the timelines are working, we're in a huge fucking freezer spell. And that freezer spell has been thawing over many years. Over many years, it's been thawing. And now we're going through a grand thawing period. We are, a lot of the false timelines are thawing out to reveal the true foundations of who we are, but also the organic timelines are able to come on board now. There's a huge thawing that's happening on the earth and in our literal systems. Our systems were under freezer spells. Antarctica, why they don't want you to go there? Okay. So the eclipse energies in general are working to turn our light bodies on to a higher level, which is also why, like I said to you, many bodies on the earth that are still connected to the false matrix contracts, the grids, the false matrix narratives and scripts will no longer be able to cross over into this energy. Okay, I spoke about that before with the illnesses at the beginning of the video. So this eclipse has been working as a trigger to evict false contracts and stalls in the bones, in the spine, but very specifically in the nervous system and fascia. So what I mean by this is that those false scripts and false contracts and spells, they may have been frozen and located in the spine and the bones, but the way that they were supposed to be able to move was through the fascia and the nervous system, which works almost like a circuitry, a circuit board. But those things began to get frozen in the fascia and the nervous system too. So over time, you would come into complete stall. You'd become terminal. Your terminals would be stalled. They called this sickness. They called it disease. They called it death. But really what it was is that from the time you entered the false matrix, you entered with a certain amount of connectivity still coursing through you because of your source code and because of how they connected certain source coded beings to the bodies of the earth. But the truth of the matter is, as soon as you entered, you've been going through a deceleration process of your life force as it was siphoned and taken from you. That's what aging and disease is. These are not the true templates. You're not supposed to die and age. You're supposed to have your own individual clock system that aligns with your soul and the evolutionary process you came on the earth to experience. This is what Virgo comes to reinstate. Next eclipse is the full moon in Virgo. We'll talk a little bit about that if we have time too. So eclipses they can act like switches on the circuitry. So they can literally cause timelines, habits, mindsets, identities, attachments to get rerouted quickly. They can cause a complete shift in circuitry. Kind of like turning a switch on, turning it off. It would be the other way around, right? Turning switch on, turning it off, right? That's how it works. You know, if you remember how, like, beyond just thinking about a switch, think about how a switch works. It turns something on because it allows the circuitry of the electricity now to flow. When it's turned off, it's short circuiting. It's stopping the flow of electricity, so it's no longer running. Eclipses can work to switch things on that were off and switch things off that were on, especially because you're working with Aquarian energy, especially because of that. Because Aquarius, again, is the sign that connects us with our circuitry, with our networking, with how all things are connected. All things are connected, right? Aquarius is a sign of the zodiac that is in charge of the infrastructure of how all things are connected. And in Pisces, you're just experiencing the fullness of that connection. But that connection is made possible through Aquarius. Yes, which is why it's the water bearer. Because your circuitry is very much interconnected with the elements of air and water, the mental and the emotional planes. Why? Well, because the water is how things flow, but the air is the messaging and the command that flows through the water too. Right? Which is why air connects you to the voice, into the mind, into the thoughts, and water connects to the feeling, into the flow, to the currency. The way those things travel and are experienced is through the waters. Aquarius is where the interconnectedness of those fields, those elements, and how they connect to your circuitry, how it works, and very specifically how your psyche is used. Because your psyche, what we call the psyche, is that meeting point between air and water. It's how you think affects your emotional reality. That's your psyche. The experiences you've had affect how you think. The experiences that are stored in you emotionally, how that then begins to affect how you think. And how you think affects what is stored in you emotionally. It's a feedback loop. The mental and the emotional planes, your mental and emotional body, they work together. Your mind affects your emotions and your emotions affect your mind, right? And that is the psyche, where thoughts meet feelings and feelings meet thoughts, and what is born in your energy field and in your experiences because of that. So when a circuit reroutes or is rewritten, what once was used as a route can no longer move through it anymore. So now we're moving into a little bit, I'm going to try to keep this short, right? Now we're moving into a little bit more about the mechanics of what is going on in energy fields as these Atlantean stationing contracts die. It is shifting your circuitry back. So there's a few things that are coming into play through this post-eclipse window. For one thing, those stationing contracts no longer can fly unless you yourself are choosing to continue to adhere to the scripts that those stationing contracts were running through you. But the actual technologies that kept you bound by those scripts, it's no longer, right? And what that is also causing is a tripping of your system to put it back into alignment with your true circuitry for as long as you're on board with that, in terms of how you think and how you're applying your own mind and your heart, or your own mental and emotional body. The application of your psyche in all of this is important, right? So when a circuit reroutes or it is rewritten, what once used it as a route, what the energy that once channeled through that original route, it can no longer move that way anymore. So this can cause a buildup of pressure as the old channels are closed, right? So for many of you, old channels of movement have been closed and new channels are coming online to redirect things where they're supposed to go. So for many of you whose literal physical bodies are connected to certain points on the earth where you were either binded, but you were binded because your body has a direct connection with the flow and the circuitry of earth and her grids. Some of you might have experienced this, or you might be experiencing this through the expression of pain and like frequencies building up before the new circuitry is registered and the new routes begin to open for the energy to go where it needs to go. Now, some of that build up, it's going to be false contracts, false scripts, false spells, things that don't fucking belong to you, false commands over your system. And some of it is going to be your own pent up energy and power that those commands and contracts and spells and scripts were keeping locked into place. And because of that, this as it begins to thaw and to move again into its proper circuitry, those spells and contracts, etc., that were kept into place also because of the technologies of the earth that existed to also keep them into place, that no longer do, right? They have to go. They'll go back to source. They'll go back to where they need to go for their point of harmonic resonance. And then your true power, your true codes are going to then be able to circulate through you again. So this energy that is causing the buildup, it may or may not be organically yours. So I think I just said that. Some of it is your suppressed power. But a lot of it has to do with the spells, contracts, scripts, and commands utilized by and through the false matrix and her players to suppress and stall you and prevent the rightful flow that brings your light body back online. So for those of you evicting these false contracts and spells where you were originally binded to trees and mountains, you may be going through big lower body clearing. Okay, so not only are you clearing the old, but your body is now remembering also how to embody your true codes again on earth. You might also want to look very specifically at your Sagittarius and ninth house placements. You should also understand and overstand that this is happening in conjunction um, with the channelings I was having like 2 weeks ago about source broadcasting nodes coming back on Earth, which is Gemini energy. Sagittarius is Gemini's sister sign. So it's one thing to be a broadcasting node. It's another thing to be able to walk the earth with that signal intact. Sagittarius is how you walk the earth and you spread that signal. Okay, so this is like a Sagittarius is like the embodiment of Gemini energy in some ways. So you might want to check out very specifically where you have Sagittarius placements, ninth house, what's in your ninth house, and where you have Sagittarian degrees. And the Sagittarian degrees are 9 and 21, and to some extent also the 14, because it connects us to the Temperance card, which is a card of Sagittarius in the tarot. So it may be moving through your hips and legs. Okay, so if it's moving through your hips and your legs, this is trying to bring back onto online safety within your own, not only your own body, but safety and trust with being able to move forward with your true contracts. In the false matrix, not only were you stalled, your contracts were stalled, but you also were then put into fear programming that erected frequency fences to keep you afraid of moving in alignment with your true contracts. So as this energy courses and it leaves, it might be more expressed in your lower limbs. And it's there to help you, as you clear it, feel safe and more permitted to move forward in alignment with your true contracts, your true blueprints, your true source code. It's there to help you become comfortable again in your energy field being your home base, and to help you feel like you belong again. You belong to yourself. You belong on the earth. All of these contracts were designed to make you feel like a fucking orphan, to feel like a motherless child on the earth, and to program your nervous system into feeling that way too. This is the abundance of Cancer energy we've been going through since the last eclipse season. The last eclipse was the new moon in Virgo. I believe it was September the 19th. In 2025, it occurred at 29 degrees. And every new moon since, new moon in Libra, new moon in Scorpio, new moon in Sagittarius, new moon in Capricorn, new moon in Aquarius, and then next month, the new moon in Pisces, have all occurred at 28 degrees. 28 is a Cancerian degree. These energies have been working in so many different ways. And there's so many facets and layers to this. I've only just touch some of it when I'm telling you about Cancer's connection to the nervous system and regenerating the truth of your nervous system, and all of that is coming through this Cancerian degree of the new moons at 28. But what this is also helping you to do is, as you take back your nervous system as being your own, it's like you're taking back, it's like you've been a crab without a shell on the earth. You're taking back that shell, right? But what's also important is that you know that as you do that, this is what enables you to no longer feel like a stranger or like you don't belong here. Like it's what helps you feel at home in yourself. And coming back to feeling at home within yourself is what allows the earth to be your home again in truth. The earth will not become our homes again. We will not feel as if the earth is our home again until we first come into deep union with self, to the point where we feel at home in self. We trust ourselves enough. We are grounded in the truth of who we are, our contracts. That is necessary for us to feel at home again on earth. It is necessary for earth to feel like it's at home with herself. It's necessary for even the freaking animals and for nature to feel like earth is their home again too. Yes? You might also be feeling it in your lower extremities, because what's coming back online for you is your ability to select your own future path. So literally now what is coming back online is your ability to make the sovereign decision of where your life is going, and your ability to map out how you want your life to flow. And you might have thought that you had that originally, but none of us did, because we were all placed into false scripts in the false matrix. We were all given these limited ideas of who we could be on the earth. And then if you were these beings who were targeted and then binded through these Atlantean stationing contracts, then your life has never been your own. You've never been able to walk the truth of who you are. And the truth is nobody could, but you were more binded. Okay, so the eclipse, for those of you who are resonating with this, the eclipse has initiated a system-wide clearing to drop the current back into your legs, the proper flow of life force back into your legs, the proper circuitry back into your system, so that what you decide upon through your own psyche also, it becomes livable, actionable, and stable. It's no longer short-circuiting, or the minute that you walk into the timeline that is yours, you no longer can, and there's a block, there's a stall, there's a collapse. All of that is being undone. Now, for those of you who might be feeling it through both your arms and your legs, that means there's a clearing that is occurring through your limbs, right? So together, this signals a reclamation of agency and authority, reinstating your capacity to act and to move sovereignly, to be free from the tethers, the hooks, the cords, and the false contracts designed to flow through you while binding you from your own power and resources. Some of you who have been binded to other beings, especially these Yahweh-coded beings who were using your fields to enact what it is they wanted to enact in their reality, and even etherically, you might have had issues with your right side specifically. That's your side of power, that's your side of direction. If you had issues on the left side, that's to do with your ability to receive what is yours. You receive through the left, you put out through the right. And they work together, because that's the magic of who you are. Your left brain actually controls your right side, and your right brain actually controls you. So in all ways, it's interconnected. Many of you who have been literally, your light bodies were binded to these other beings like false light bodies, these false robotic overlays they had. It was literally stalling your body so that you couldn't, it's not even that you couldn't move. A lot of you had mobility issues because of this. I'm not going to go there. You might have had certain mobility issues that came on with age or whatever, right? But a lot of it is these contracts that had your light body binded to another being, right? And that has physical effects. It has physical effects. Okay, so a lot of those contracts are coming down. Like I said, a lot of these contracts for reinstating these Atlantean stationing contracts, it came through Aquarius season last year. A lot of it came back around through that Aquarius window last year, January and February of 2025. If this was the case for you, you may have had an uptick in certain symptoms that all of a sudden came alive in your body. That was to show you where you were being blocked, where you were being binded, where energy was being stalled, where it was being redirected, where you were literally connected to someone else who's been using your field to enact a reality that doesn't belong to them. Whether they're doing it consciously or not, it doesn't matter. A lot of these beings, it's unconscious, but it doesn't take away from who they were to you in the original timeline. Okay? So this eclipse, for many of you, is working as a system or a field level reset. It's pulling power out of the old relational entanglements, right? And this includes, very specifically, the cross-incarnational binds, the beings who you have been connected to, and you want to believe it's destiny, it's soulmate bullshit. A lot of that hasn't even been able to be possible on the earth yet because of all of these entanglements. Okay, so it's this eclipse is pulling the power out of these old relational entanglements and these grids that were designed to constantly pull certain players into your reality. It's also pulling your power back out of old timelines that were designed to siphon you. There's a lot of power that is able to return to you as you are open to receive it, based upon, again, your psyche, based upon who you believe you are, based upon, your own nervous system's capacity to hold your truth again. This eclipse is also pushing you back into your true circuitry to reclaim what is yours and kick out what isn't. That's that Sagittarius energy again. Sagittarius energy also helps you to establish the boundaries and borders that keep you in your sovereignty and keep others in their sovereignty too. You should know, and I touched on this in the beginning, that your fascia, a lot of this is coming through. You might feel it in your limbs, but the system and the circuitry through which it's moving through is your fascia and your nervous system. But let's talk about the fascia for a minute. Your fascia works in your body as a memory net. It's an internet or a web that maps the storage of your emotional energies and contracts that then become responsible for your emotional resonance and frequency. Your fascia can store energetic cords. It can store old roles and personas based upon your emotional attachment to those things still. So it holds those scripts. It can hold vows, agreements, commands, contracts, scripts, spells. And this would be cross-incarnationally, because it's through the waters that you bring forth the information from every timeline that you've existed cosmically. Your akasha live in your fluids. So if you have lived on Earth multiple times and you died in a certain state and you weren't able to process stagnancies, stalls, traumas, then when you are born again on Earth, those same things exist in your emotional body, even if you can't access them yet consciously. And they reside in your fascia also, because that's the circuitry through which many of your fluids flow in your physical body. Your fascia also holds on to unconscious postures you've held on to and that your body has become accustomed to due to survival programming and trauma looping. So even how you hold yourself, your posture, has to do with what you've been through, not only in this lifetime and timeline, cross-incarnationally. And your fascia holds the remembrance of that. It archives it. It's like a database also. Now, eclipses expose hidden structures, and this one is heavily focused on the circuitry and the channels across our bodies of existence that connect us to the earth, the cosmos, and to one another. I'm going to say that again because it's a lot. There's a huge thing that to begin to untangle in our minds, because we've been taught that we're just these like finite individual lumps of flesh, when you're a cosmic, multidimensional being that connects to everything, right? So eclipses begin to expose hidden structures, and this one specifically has been heavily focused on exposing the structures of our circuitry and the channels across our bodies of existence that connect us to the earth, the cosmos, and to one another. All of that circuitry, the grids, the interfaces. This is what this eclipse has been working on highlighting, clearing, and bringing back to source code. So this eclipse has been doing away with false networks and networking. So where we've been bound into false circuitry to either stall us or have our energy fields used on behalf of others, especially like I said to you with these Yahweh coded beings who were the ones who came online through these Atlantean contracts to create interfaces where they could have access to our energy fields for the purpose of allegedly helping the collective to evolve together and then let ego get the better of them. They are being disconnected entirely from our systems and the systems of the earth. And their false authority is being revoked from when they took over our portals, our channels, our circuits, our access codes, our bodies in their Atlantean master and slave contracts. And now the trajectory of time is moving us to the full moon in Virgo that's occurring in 2 weeks. And this is a timeline death vortex. So what this new moon in Aquarius eclipse has been bringing up, what has been coming up over the past 6-month cycle since the new moon eclipse in Virgo occurred at September 19th. And then also we had a new moon in Virgo occurring at the end of August, I think around August 21st last year at the 0 degree mark. That began to set a new precedent. And then the September 19th new moon in Virgo eclipse at 29 degrees began to open a clearing container to bring us to the full moon in Virgo. We've been clearing this, clearing it out, clearing out these codes until we come to the new Aquarius season where we're dealing with the circuitry and the grids. And then we're clearing it out completely because through Pisces season, Pisces is where everything comes together. Getting ready to clear it out completely through the full moon in Virgo, which again, full moon in Virgo every year works as a timeline vortex, a timeline death vortex. But this year it's even more powerful because of the buildup that's occurred since the last eclipse season in Virgo and because the South Node is in Virgo. And we're getting ready to switch into the North Node in Aquarius and the South Node in Leo to start to bring onto the earth the materialization of our golden age timelines and the true grid system that supports those experiences and realities. Now this full moon in Virgo is evacuating the timelines, the timeline technologies, and the codes that have been stored in our bodies to program us out of our source code mastery. And this includes the false time and the false timing structures, the time release and coordinated spells and the circuits, everywhere where we have been bound through false constructs of time through Saturnian fuckery. The Virgo energy has been addressing because we're not supposed to move through collective time cycles. There's a collective planetary rhythms that are here to inform our individual clocks. It was through the Atlantean timelines that we were programmed into a collective rhythm structure, a collective timing structure that is inorganic to who we are, but also inorganic in the sense that this is not how the earth is able to hold her harmonic resonance. Okay, so I've got to go because I've gone way over time. It's been a pleasure. I hope this reading was insightful, helpful, activating as fuck. I hope it's helping you to remember who you actually are. If you would like to donate to the channel, buy me a coffee, you can do so through my Ko-Fi. I will put that in the pinned comment section below. A big thank you to all of you who support me. Thank you to those of you who've made donations. As many of you know, I am not in the partner program on this platform because I don't have time to get into the why right now. But suffice to say that I don't like the exploitation that comes through those streams. So I choose to work independently. And so those of you who give to me, you're able to support my ability to continue to show up and do the work I came here to do on the earth. So I thank you. If you would like to book a session with me or purchase any of my services, you can do so directly through Ko-Fi also, ko-fi.com/Solarah Rises. For those of you who are still interested in tarot astrology one-to-one full rebirth readings with me, please contact me directly via email, solarahspeaks@proton.me. Before you come to me, please make sure that you're just coming to me to book and that you've already decided that's what you want to do. For more information on my tarot astrology readings, you can go directly to my website, solarah.info, and you can hit the tab that says Tarot Astrology Readings, and it has the information there for pricing and what it is, etc. If you need an example of what tarot astrology is and how I utilize it, you can find that on my channel, Solarah Rises, which is full of many readings where I apply tarot astrology to the collective energy. Okay? Yes, I think that's it. I will see you when I see you again. I know that this was very dense. Please make sure that you are staying properly hydrated and grounded as these activations come through. Please make sure you are looking after yourself first. Okay? As you look after yourself first, you look after all of us and the earth too. Okay? So I'll see you again when I see you, and until then, be well.